Tune into episode 78, Between Two Bridges. We have Rick Sebak, the man, the myth, the legend.
You're listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. With your hosts, Joe Ferranti and Jerry Kenna, produced by Nathan Kenna. Interviewing entrepreneurs, business operators, and investors. This episode of Between Two Bridges is brought to you by Duro Cleaners, luxury laundry care conveniently delivered to your door. Visit durocleaners.com because life's better without laundry.
Episode 78, Between Two Bridges, with me and Jerry here, and we have the Emmy Award-winning voice of Pittsburgh, Mr. Rick Sebak.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Glad to have you.
So,
Hey,
This was exciting. We were looking forward to this for a while.
yeah, we had to reschedule a couple of times, and then the power's been out. So I was thinking, if we have to reschedule this again, I'm just going to send you a really nice note saying, hey, we tried. So.
Yeah, it's been it was funny when Joe told me he reached out. I'm like, are you kidding? I said, this is great. I said, I can't go to Kennywood without hearing his voice when we're standing in line at the potato patch. Like this, I hear him in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I always think back to that scene. I guess we could start there because it's pretty early in your career. I mean, I was shocked at it's 1988?
It's Kennywood, yeah.
So in those videos, they like come off the log jammer, and those girls to me were at that age when I saw that when I was younger, I was like, they're so like that's when I get older, I'm gonna date girls like that. This is awesome. I can't wait. So yeah, it's definitely for Pittsburgh people and fans of amusement parks. It's like legendary.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I remember I mentioned it at my job interview.
Oh, really?
I had worked for 11 years before I came back. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to school at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and then I got my first job in South Carolina in public television. And I worked there for 11 years. And there were two other guys, and we had a pact that if anyone got his 10-year pin, the others would kill him. And I got my 10-year pin. And then one of those guys, he had gone on to work for the PBS station in Denver, David Ryan. And he called me one day and said, hey, there's an ad in Broadcasting Magazine. You should answer. And I said, why? And he said, it's in Pittsburgh. I said, do I want to go back to Pittsburgh? My parents still live there, you know? He said, you never see a big station like WQED advertising for a producer. So, I didn't need a job. My station there had just sent me to Australia for 28 days, and I was loving my job. But I thought, oh, okay, and you write sort of a flip letter. I said, I worked at Horns downtown one summer. My parents still live in Bethel Park. And I sent a little documentary, a half-hour documentary that my cameraman and I had decided if we're going to Australia for 28 days, we were covering an arts festival. But he said, we should make a documentary about our trip too, because we're going to Australia. And you're driving on the wrong side of the road and that kind of stuff. And so we did that, and that's called the Slightly Wacky Aussie Doco. And that's what I sent as a sample of my work. And QED called me and said, why don't you come visit your parents? We'd like to meet you.
Oh, that's awesome.
They didn't even pay to get me up here. They just said, why don't you go visit your parents?
I don't really want to visit my parents, but can we just come in?
Because my mom's sick.
So I did that, and they offered me the job, and I what do I really want to do and everything. But it's a bigger audience here, and that was one of the factors. Also, I missed having 4 seasons.
Yeah.
I like that very much, and so QED had me up, and I had 9 interviews in one day. And at the end of the day, they said, "You want the job?"
So is WQED a pretty large network within the PBS system?
I would say that at that time we were probably bigger.
Okay.
Because we were still doing the National Geographic specials.
Okay.
And we did a lot of national programming. We don't do that much national programming anymore.
Okay.
Chris Fenimore's cooking shows get out there and, for fundraising and stuff like that. But
Well, Mr. Rogers was he?
oh, Mr. Rogers
Yeah.
was still there for sure.
Yeah, he
yes.
was a big
and,
part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big power. And I don't know that we still have that within the PBS system, but I mean, we still have the reputation.
Yeah.
So, and it is,
What made you decide to do public broadcasting instead of going into non-public? I guess what would we consider private?
Yeah, commercial broadcasting.
yeah.
I like the product better.
Okay.
I like the things I watched on, and actually, it made very right there at the beginning. I was thinking I might want to go into children's television.
Okay.
And that was my first job in South Carolina. It was a children's show called Whee!
Okay.
WHEEE exclamation point. And it was produced by Josie Carey, who I knew as an on-air person here in Pittsburgh. She and Fred Rogers together produced the first program at WQED.
Oh wow.
Oh, okay.
Which was called Children's Corner.
Okay.
And all those puppets that people still know, and even Daniel Striped Tiger, that's now an animated character.
Yeah, Daniel Tiger.
All started there.
They were in that first show. Yeah. So I knew that I liked public television, and actually there were several programs that I just thought, I really like that, and I wish I could do things like that. And so that's sort of what got me to public television. And I did that thing with Josie, and then I did my junior year abroad. So that sort of interrupted any sort of thing that I'd set up there. But when I came back, they said, come back down for another summer, and do some things with Josie. And I did that. Then after I graduated from college, I started looking for another job.
Yeah.
And was having no luck. And then they called and said, hey, we really need a production assistant on this new thing that we're doing. Can you come back? And I said, yeah, definitely. Because I was, sort of 6 months out of school and I wanted a job.
Yeah.
They were doing a show for, a government agency. And they needed somebody to work on that with them. So I went back and worked that, and I wasn't crazy about the script. And I now look on the back on this and I think, like, what chutzpah? But I rewrote the script and I took it to the writer, which is even more chutzpah.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? I really like this. She said, but my script has been approved by 3 government agencies. We're not going back. She said, but we have an opening for a writer. You should turn this in as a sample of your work. And that's what I did. And I got that job. And then so I became a writer producer in South Carolina and stayed 11 years. And got to do some cool stuff.
Yeah. Now, growing up and going into broadcasting, obviously your voice has become iconic in Pittsburgh.
But I don't have an announcer's voice,
There's there's just certain people in this world that have a voice that are just perfect for narrating and storytelling. Did you know when you started into this that was going to be such a big part of your career, was storytelling and narrating and being that iconic voice behind the documentaries?
No, I don't. I always liked using my voice because it was the most convenient.
Yeah.
As an example, in 1988, I did a show about Fred Rogers because it was the 20th anniversary of him being on national television. And we called it Our Neighbor Fred Rogers, and I narrated it. And everybody seemed to like it. We sent it to PBS, and they said, oh, we like this, but we want a professional voice. So I got to go to New York and work with David Hartman, who was then the host of Good Morning America. And he narrated the national version of Our Neighbor Fred Rogers.
Huh.
Then when Fred died, 2002, 2003, they decided, let's redo that same program and, make some changes and acknowledge. And that was narrated by Michael Keaton.
Okay.
So that
got
program is sort of existed
twice.
Right. 3 different versions. There's still the original with my voice, and then there's David Hartman, and then there's Michael Keaton. And I got to go to LA with that too, so it was really fun.
Yeah.
I always think to like when cell phones first came out and you got to record your voice, like I would have known I couldn't do your profession immediately because I hated the way I sounded.
Everybody hates the way they sound. In fact, it's a poem by W.H. Auden, who was not appalled by the sound of their own voice recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's something about it.
And I mean, in many of those first shows, like you don't see me in Kennywood Memories, you just hear me.
Just hear you.
Yeah, and I like that. That's sort of like classic documentary style. If you can do it without narration, that's even better.
Yeah.
And I did some of those in South Carolina. I remember I did a show about correctional officers for the prison system down there, and we had such great interviews. You could just they wanted a program that would show candidates how hard the job is. And so we talked to prison guards about it and everything, and it was very good.
Yeah.
It was called, I remember we used a quote from one of them, "Fear is a good sign." Huh. But then here in Pittsburgh, it's just worked out that I started to use my own voice more and more. And then, I don't know, one of the series that I did, maybe It's Pittsburgh or something, I started to appear more regularly just to intro the stories. You still didn't see me in the stories.
But you did the introduction portion.
I would, appear on camera and say, hey, in this show, you're going to see 3 stories or 4 stories or whatever it was. What I'm doing right now is we're making stories for YouTube, and I still think in terms of a program. So we sort of string the stories together, and now I'm calling it Lucky to Live in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I've done 2 of those.
And everything old comes back around because the National Geographic type thing with Tom Hanks narrating that.
But that's on commercial TV, but it does look like a PBS program.
Yeah, and it's
the Americas.
like old things come back. And,
yes.
And they're informative. They like kind of make you use your mind, and it's good for kids, like back to your basics where you like thought. But where do you does WQED come to you with the ideas, or do you generate? Like if you wanted to do a show about I don't know, the best pierogi in Pittsburgh or.
Yeah, it's probably me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. At the start, it was definitely assignments.
Okay.
The first show I did at QED is called Transplant Town. Because in 1987, when I came back to Pittsburgh, more organ transplants were done in Pittsburgh that year than in the rest of the world combined. We were the world capital of organ transplants, and there was a national conference of transplant recipients here in town. They said, we want to have a program on when they're here. So we did Transplant Town. The story that I tell most from it is, that was because of Dr. Starzl, Thomas Starzl. He had brought cyclosporin, which was an anti-rejection drug, to Pittsburgh from Denver. He came from Denver. And we asked if we could shoot in his operating room. And that's really hard. I mean, that involves a lot of permissions and all of that, and permissions from the patient's family and the patient. And we went through all of that. And we had to be at the, Presby at 5:30 a.m. or something like that to be ready to go in and get all suited up and all of that. And we did all of that. And just as we're getting ready to leave Dr. Starzl's office and walk down to the operating room with him, somebody comes up and says, there's a problem with the organ. There's no surgery today. And so, okay. So we walk back towards his office and he says, I am famished. Let's go to the O. And the O was still open 24 hours a day then. And I'd never been to the O.
Oh, really?
I mean, I was only back in Pittsburgh a very short period of time. And so the first time I went to the O, I went with Dr. Starzl at 7 o'clock in the morning.
The perfect time.
Yes.
Breakfast hot dog.
Breakfast hot dogs. So
at what point was there a particular project or assignment where was like your turning point where you're like, this is what I want to do. This is my path. This was what I was destined to do.
Well, I did that Transplant Town, which was an assignment. I also did a program called the Mon, the Al, and the O, which was an assignment that someone else had actually started. They were just calling it Three Rivers. And then I mentioned in my job interview, I mentioned the Kennywood thing. And the woman who hired me, Nancy Lavin, she said, it's summertime. Why don't you look into that Kennywood thing you want to do? And it worked out. I mean, when I called Kennywood, I got the right person on the phone and all of that. So it was just lucky. I'm a very lucky guy. So then there's some other, a bunch of engineers came to us and said, from CMU, and said, we think there could be a program about Pittsburgh engineers and all of that. And that's what led to Flying Off the Bridge to Nowhere and Other Tales of Pittsburgh Bridges. And then eventually I did a show called Invented, Engineered, and Pioneered in Pittsburgh, more about engineers. I say as far as like specific programs, I still also think very fondly of a hot dog program, because that was the first time it was a national program. And they said, who do you want to work with? Who do you want on your crew? Before that, crews were assigned. But then to be able to say, these are the people I want to work with, it made it better.
Yeah.
And so, you didn't end up in exotic locations with people you didn't really want to have dinner with.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any stories that you have come up with, ideas that you've come up with that wanted to do, that you've not been able to do, that were kind of missed opportunities in your mind, or something you'd like to do, or anything like that that you haven't done yet?
Boy, I wish I had a good answer for that. There's probably a bunch, but it makes me to think. I always wanted to do a show about Pittsburgh cemeteries, but we couldn't find funding for it. I was at PBS and someone asked the same question. Said, "Is there anything you ever?" And I said, "I've always wanted to do Pittsburgh cemeteries." And they said, "We would do national cemeteries." So I never did Pittsburgh cemeteries, although there is the Allegheny Cemetery is in my cemetery show. But it's a show about cemeteries across the country. I just think people like to know more about the cemeteries near where they live.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I've always had those sort of two streams. I have local shows, and then we were lucky to get to do national shows. And that was really because of Pennsylvania Diners and Other Roadside Restaurants, the show that I made about that, which grew out of Pennsylvania Roadshow, which was, the first statewide program I did. There used to be an organization called Pennsylvania Public Television Network, PPTN, and they funded Pennsylvania Diners. And then that grew into, actually, there was an in-house screening, and at that, Chris Fenimore, who's our chef on QED, QED Cooks, he at that time was our program director, and there was one diner in Pennsylvania Roadshow. And he said, I could watch a whole show on diners. And I said, I could make a whole show on diners.
Heck yeah.
And up to that point, we had always sent the programs to PBS and said, hey, would you consider airing this nationally? And they'd always say, it's a little too local, too parochial. Only you people in Western Pennsylvania care about this. And then when we sent the diner show, they said, you know what? Everybody knows this kind of restaurant. Let's air it.
I always think that that's a great thing for local business, because you could just be you never know what they're going through. Then you show up and then people are like, well, we got to go, like this Barstool Sports guy does it now with pizza reviews. It could boost their business, give them a little uptick. So I always thought that was kind of cool when you did those kind of stuff.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah. And, many places were very, very grateful and all of that. But a lot of it's just luck.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I was talking to somebody at the station the other day about when we did Pennsylvania Diners, we literally would go to one diner and say, like, are there any around here that you also like? And, so, there are a couple in there, I think, that we just showed up and just said, hey, we're doing this show about Pennsylvania Diners. Can we come in and film for a while? And talk to the owner and that kind of thing. And it worked out nice. Some were set up long in advance, but others were just totally, we have an extra day here. We shot at State College at Ye Old College Diner.
Yep. Are they closed?
They're closed. Yeah, that's
it's
gone.
a shame.
But we stopped there because we we heard bad snowstorm predictions, and we were running back from like northeastern Pennsylvania, heading back to Pittsburgh. We're going to State College. Let's see if we can do something there. And, it worked out.
Yeah.
Because that was really lively in the middle of the night.
So you had mentioned the funding for the cemetery show. And I don't know. I think that public broadcasting, QED, we all grew up with it. The Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and having access to that. And I know that television has changed tremendously since we were kids. But I don't know. I think that's probably a lot of it is taken for granted that it's just there. It's Channel 13. It's just there. Can you talk a little bit about how that funding works? So you come up with an idea. You need to get that idea funded in order. Now, are you going out and looking for donors, or are you trying to get QED or PBS to fund it? How does it work? And maybe you could talk a little bit. I'm sure that I know that there were struggles even back when we were in school about raising money for public broadcasting. And I'm sure now it's probably much worse because with streaming services and people cutting, cable cutting and things like that, I would imagine that it's probably even more challenging for funding for public broadcasting. But
yeah,
maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have been at times very much involved in finding the funding. The national shows generally were funded by PBS and or the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which are two separate things. I think the last two national shows that I did, a few great pie places and a few good bakeries, were both funded just by PBS.
Okay.
And that's a matter of putting together a proposal and, a budget and all of that and trying to figure things out. Locally, I've been very, very lucky to have made a connection with the Buell Foundation. And at the beginning of my shows, you often see that. This, made possible by the Buell Foundation, serving southwestern Pennsylvania since 1927. And that's from the Boggs and Buell department store that used to be on the north side. Not there anymore, but, the family money was put. They had no children. The Buells had no children, so the Buell Foundation was formed. And so, right now I'm not, things are changing, and I'm not sure how this all works. But it's always a struggle. We always are asking for money. We're always doing pledge breaks and that kind of thing. And we count on the public in public television, and I'm sure it will be a struggle. It will continue to be a struggle.
Yeah. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it's not going to change, but it is nice to have broadcasting of some sort of content that isn't bought by an advertiser, right?
Right.
And it's hard. It's hard to watch some of the whether you're watching the news or any of it, and you have so many times where, well, you can't say this because it's going to offend this sponsor, and you can't, and then there's so many, and you always have to wonder, or what they're telling me being affected by that commercial break. When you're watching public broadcasting, and it's not. There's nothing there. There's nothing like that. So it is a good outlet for things like that, especially for informational documentaries, because you get to see the real world of Pittsburgh without the possibility of it being bought and sold by any of the corporations within the city of Pittsburgh.
Well, part of the changing situation is who's watching television.
Right.
Is everybody just streaming things?
That's,
is YouTube ruling, or, can you still get people to a television? And I was really interested, Rob Owen, who's the TV critic now for the Trib, he did an article about the fact that Pittsburgh is now the 23rd largest media market in America.
What was it when you got here?
I can't remember if we were still in the top 10 when I first came, but we were probably in the top 15.
Oh, we've dropped.
Oh yeah, we've dropped because we lost a lot of population in the 80s and stuff like that. But he points out we are still number one in the percentage of people who still watch television.
Really?
But the Nielsen ratings
Yeah.
were able to tell us that. Pittsburgh. And that may have something to do with our aging population.
Yeah.
But, that's why I say it's still, I think, good to, even though we've been doing stories for YouTube, it's good to put them in a TV program that's on and you can say, hey, watch my new program. Because I think there's enough traditional older people here to...
Yeah, I think it gives you like a trust level too. So if you're on television and you're in YouTube, like, especially in through a kid's eye, like my kids, if they see something on TV, that it has to be true. And then if they see it on YouTube, then it's like, this is factual.
So
Not always a good thing.
what has QED and PBS done to adapt to this new world of streaming? Have they been able to make changes within their offerings to be able to kind of adapt all these people that are cutting cable and just switching to streaming services?
I think they're trying everything they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Scramble
they're
button.
certainly aware of it. Everyone's aware that,
Right.
things are changing and, people don't sit down. I always say that I was so lucky with the Diners program when it aired nationally. That was still the era when people clicked through channels with a remote. And I said, and you would go, sequentially through the channels that existed. You might have been lucky and had, 15 at the time. And something about it made them stop. Oh, that's unusual. Oh,
Right.
look, there's a diner there on TV.
Yeah.
And I profited from that. So, and you still got to just play the game and hope that, something that you do gets some attention. A lot of people badmouth social media, but I sort of like the social media and, like playing with it and all of that. And, trying to learn how it works and,
It's it puts the world at your fingertips. I think that we connected through social media to be here tonight.
Right.
I think that, before you would have had to like maybe call WQED and ask for permission or, and if you had to know somebody, now you can go straight to the source and send them a message and see what sticks. But
but part of it is also just, I worry about, the karma. I have to ask people to do things. And if somebody says to me, hey, we would like you on our podcast, I got to say yes. Otherwise I get bad karma. But I love the writer Kurt Vonnegut, and in his book, Cat's Cradle, he creates a religion called Bokononism. And one of the tenets of Bokononism is unexpected travel plans are dancing lessons from God. And I always like that. And I've adapted it, and I say unexpected invitations are dancing lessons from God. So I get an unexpected invitation to be on, Between Two Bridges.
there you go.
Hey, that's an unexpected invitation. Yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to look at things, because I think that sometimes people just are so stuck in their ways and like you never know what the next door is going to open to you. Like we did this on a whim, like kind of we put it together almost 2 years ago now, and we've met great people. We've always compared this to like therapy for us as business owners, because people don't want to hear your problems when you own your own business. They just don't care. They think you have $1 million in the bank because you own your own business. So we started this like that, and to get people in here to to tell, like, I think you asked me, you said, well, I'm not really a business owner. I said, but you have stick-to-itiveness, You handed us 4 pages of like, and this wasn't easy. Like you weren't like, hey, let's just do this show about diners, and it happened. You had to push through to get that funded and get that done.
no, but when I look back on it, it's all like, wow, we were lucky,
Yeah.
to get to do this. I think every kid that goes into this field wants to do what I get to do so often, and that kind of thing, or I've gotten to do over the years. I'm getting ready to do a trip. I want to go to North Dakota and Idaho. I'm just going to do it on a vacation because they're the only 2 states I've never been to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got 48 under my belt.
That's
North
great.
Dakota and Idaho are, ahead. And I worked with one editor for 30 some years, Kevin Conrad, and he passed away during the pandemic from cancer that he'd been fighting for about 10 years. And his eldest daughter, he had 5 kids, his eldest daughter lives in Boise. And that's my goal.
Yeah.
I called and I said, Paige, I'm going to come to take you and your husband out to dinner. She said, that'd be great. So, that's my goal. And I put together you asked about, projects that never happened. I put together a project, I was calling it Numbered Highways. I did a show about the Lincoln Highway, and I wanted to do just numbered highways, which could include an interstate if we wanted to, but, and I think a lot of people know this, that the first transcontinental highways were 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 from north to south.
Right.
And then the interstates, they reversed it. So Interstate 10's in the south, it goes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 across the top of Pennsylvania,
90.
And then 90. In the process of doing that, I found out about US 10. And it now starts in Detroit. It may have, previously in its initial thing started in Boston or something like that, but now it starts in Detroit. It goes across Michigan. It's the only road in America that gets on a ferry boat and crosses Lake Michigan.
Oh, that's
so I've made reservations to do that because I just thought that's really cool.
Really cool.
And that proposal I turned into PBS in March of 2020, the absolute worst time in human history to turn in a proposal. It just got lost.
Yeah.
But I'm following
Circle
it up because I want to.
So you're going to do it.
I'm just going to do it by myself
on Highway 10.
Highway 10. So,
and it goes
from a small town in Michigan. I want to say Livonia, but that's not right. It begins with L.
Okay.
And it goes across Lake Michigan on a coal-powered ferry boat.
Wow.
No way.
The last one on the Great Lakes. So.
And where does it end?
In a small town in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Crossing Lake Michigan on an old ferry boat.
Yeah,
and takes 4.5 hours.
On the ferry.
On the ferry.
Yeah, I go on an annual motorcycle trip with a group of guys. We go every year, and
1,000 miles.
We do. It depends, but typically, I think last year we did about 1,600 miles. So we do it over 6 days, and we leave from Pittsburgh, and we try to go somewhere different every year. Then we repeat a lot because there's only so far we can get in 6 days and get back, right, on a motorcycle.
Right. So you go 3 days out and 3 days back.
Pretty much.
Okay.
So we've done, Nashville. That's about as far south as we can get. We've gone up into New England, done like Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Kennebunkport, Maine.
That's nice.
Last year we went to Wisconsin. So as we were planning this trip, one of the big discussions that we had was, do we take the ferry or do we go all the way around the lake and go through Chicago? Now, I think there were 8 motorcycles. 8 motorcycles riding through Chicago can be dicey. But the ferry's 4.5 hours. And we got to load 8 motorcycles onto this ferry and then sit there for 4.5 hours while we float across the lake. We ended up riding around, but what we ended up doing was the first day we headed west, ended up in Indiana, I think around South Bend. And then
Lincoln Highway.
Yeah. And then we went around Chicago and up into Wisconsin, Milwaukee, which is where the Harley Museum is. That's where Harley Davidson's main headquarters is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we spent some time there. Coincidentally, we didn't plan this, and we were a little worried when we came up to it the week before. We're like, this could get real dicey. It was also the exact same time that the Republican National Convention was going on in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We're like, what are we riding into? Like road closures, like this could be a nightmare. Ended up without any problems at all. Although when we were leaving, we pulled into the Harley plant, parked our bikes, and right behind us were like 4 tour buses full of all the people that were at the convention, and they all got to tour the plant with us. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so many people here. And then when we were leaving, as we were about to pull out onto the road, a bunch of police motorcycles came up, blocked the intersection, and then all of a sudden Trump's motorcade came up through. So it was really cool to see, like, holy cow, like we're on a motorcycle trip and we're getting to watch this, front row center here.
Yeah.
So it was
American
cool to
history.
see. Yeah. But then we ended up going further north and stayed. We went and saw, we went up into Green Bay and And then we actually, over the next couple of days, we rode all the way through the Upper Peninsula.
I was about to say, the Upper Peninsula seems to be it was
beautiful.
We did a story for my pie show in Bram, Minnesota. And they have it's a little tiny town that has an annual pie festival.
Yeah.
And we went up through Chicago.
Yeah.
If we're this side of the Mississippi, I always just like to drive.
Yeah.
And so we went up there, and I looked at my GPS one night and I said, it's only like an hour longer to go back through the Upper Peninsula rather than going back through Chicago. And I said to the crew, do you mind? We do an extra hour, and let's do it. So
it's beautiful.
it is incredible. And my cameraman, Frank Colliero, had been a Duquesne Tamburitzen, and they train in the Upper Peninsula.
Oh.
And he had played in many of the little towns. So he had stories about, the towns and stuff like
It was
that.
really neat to see because there's not a whole lot up there. It's all just small towns, very old fashioned, just like they haven't caught up with the rest of the country yet. But it was really neat.
And then there's a magnificent bridge to bring you back.
Which is very scary when you're on a motorcycle, let me tell you.
Because the
Very,
wind?
very windy. Yeah. And very high. And when you don't like heights, like this guy, but we were coming up to it, and there's all these signs that say that they could close the bridge due to high winds, and if you're on a motorcycle, beware of high winds. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell are we getting ourselves into here? And we rode over that, and I'll tell you what, it was probably some of the scariest riding I've done, just getting over that bridge. And as soon as we got to the other side of that bridge, I've never been so happy to be back on land. And we stopped in Mackinac City.
I was going to say, there's a big hot dog place there.
Okay.
Has a big hot dog on top. I remember we took
seeing
pictures.
that. So we ended up spending the night in Mackinac City. We had dinner there, and ended up being really nice. Then we just rode back down through Michigan and ended up spending the last night in Cleveland, and then rode back home.
Well, actually,
it was great.
I've looked at the route too, and know from times we've gone to, and I think I'm going to leave, and my first goal would be to get to Fremont, Ohio for lunch.
How-
Leave in the morning, and we've stopped in Fremont one time just by chance.
Where's Fremont?
It's not far off the Turnpike, the Ohio Turnpike, just south of the Turnpike. And we went to a really great fish place there called Tackle Box 2.
Okay.
And I thought, I wouldn't mind at all having lunch at Tackle Box 2 again.
Yeah.
But Fremont, we found out there that day, is also where they now make Heinz ketchup.
Is it?
So it's a really nice Pittsburgh connection.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
We don't make it on the north side anymore.
Right.
It's made in Fremont, Ohio. So, I always like those kind of unexpected connections.
Heck yeah.
So that's why. And then I'll go on from there hoping, to get up somewhere into Michigan that first night. And then the second day I'll get over to where I get the ferry boat.
I think sometimes we get lost in the destination, like you used to have an atlas, you had to plan out your trip. Now with Waze, you could just put it in and tell you exactly when you're going to be there.
I say I think the best innovation of technology is GPS.
You can't get lost anymore,
No,
which is
yeah.
very nice.
But I grew up, my dad, I think he was in 46 of the 50 states. He installed remote controls on overhead cranes and trains for steel mills. And he, our family vacations, because he traveled for a living, our family vacations were staycations most of the time. But he had found a friend in Rainbow City, Alabama. And when I tell you we got in the car without a map, my dad just knew exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
Knew where we were gonna stay. It was wild to as a kid to be and then you're he would have never used the GPS. All right, we would have been lost for hours. Put that thing away. I'll get us there,
Well, when I first started to drive, one of my favorite things to do was to just, I've never been down that road before. Let's go down there and see how long it takes to come up to a road that I'm I've been here.
Yeah, gas is a lot cheaper back then.
I'd never driven up 910 before to get here.
Oh, really?
And I thought, this is great. I'm somewhere I've never been. I love that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Indianola?
Yeah.
Are we in Indianola now?
Right now we're in Indiana Township. Indianola is just a little bit down the road.
They had a nice funky sign there at the side of the road, so I like that too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I that's still one of my favorite things to do. If we're bored at home, we'll put the kids like to be in the car, with the kids in the car, my wife and I, and we'll just go, I've never been down that road, let's see. And then that feeling when you get to a traffic light and you're like, holy shit, that's how you get here? That's the best. It's like, okay, now I know another way to get here.
That's funny because I remember when I was a little kid, my mom, she called it a riding around ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I hated them. I didn't want to be lost. But
Yeah.
she and my older brother loved them. Oh, let's go for a riding around ride. Well, I had to go along.
Yeah.
But it
now-
scared me. But now I love that.
Now it's nice because if you're riding around for so long, you're like, I give up. You just put it on the phone and it takes you back home.
Right.
But it does make it a lot easier. When you're trying to come up with a story, how do you decide what's worth pursuing? What's worth telling the story? What made you decide? Because of all the not interstates, but the highways, 10 seems to be, it's only going to go through Michigan and Wisconsin.
Oh, no, then it goes on.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it goes
Oh, okay.
on. I don't know if it gets all the way to the West Coast now or not.
Okay.
But that was just going to be one of the numbered highways that I covered in that show. I wanted to cover a lot.
What makes you decide a story's worth telling?
Gut. I just, hope that my instincts are right. It's funny, when you started to have that question, I thought you were going to say, why did you pick Bedamo's Pizza over all the other pizza places? Just because I knew Anthony and I knew, I loved his pizza so much. And it's different for different things. And I did a show on pies and bakeries. I think when that started, we were going to do sweet pies, savory pies, and pizza pies. And I was working with the guy down at PBS, Donald Toms. And he called me, he goes, yeah, I think, let's just do a pie show and maybe a cake show. Well, I'm not that big a cake fan. And I said, I'm not that big a cake fan. How about bakeries and pie? Pie places and bakeries.
So you're a pie guy.
I love pie, yes. Yeah, and so, with the exception of carrot cake, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
But any other cakes, So we ended up doing bakeries, which I love. I love a good bakery and the effect that a bakery can have on a town. And, so it's just...
We grew up in Oakmont. We all know what a bakery is to a town.
It's a big bakery.
That's a big
it's
one.
Not like your
They don't
typical.
get much bigger than that.
I think it probably was smaller at one time.
It was.
Oh, it was very
This
small.
is he's on his third location.
Yeah, it's almost like a giant eagle now.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. And I grew up there and I know all the stuff that he has, and I'm overwhelmed sometimes. Like, I don't even know where to start.
Well, I grew up in Bethel, and I think Bethel Bakery is the
Bethel
only one
Bakery.
that might possibly compete with Oakmont.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's true. It's
And that was just right across the street from where I went to grade school.
So Bethel Bakery has been along is around how long now? It's been.
I know I did a story there for one of my shows, and I'm going to guess it's there since the 50s.
Yeah.
It had a different location from where it is now, but as long as I've known it, it's been sort of right next to the Bethel Fire Department and across the street from St. Valentine's, where I went to grade school.
Well, that's I don't get out that way much. So Bethel Bakery is one of those things when I am we're doing something or driving, you see it and you're like, oh, there's the Bethel Bakery.
Have you been?
I've had stuff from there. I've never gone there.
I've never been.
Yeah,
So-
it's right. The streetcar still runs through there too, which is really great. So,
Yeah.
The streetcar is the T now, but we still call it the streetcar.
And it's funny because we have 4 in Pittsburgh, 4 streetcars, 4 different
Lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
You go to other cities and
we're
can go.
lucky out in the South. I don't live in the South Hills anymore, but it's nice to have it. And it used to go all the way to Charleroi. I know that just from things that I've done in research, and now it ends in Library. I did a show about Route 88 for my Nebby series, and that's the kind of things you learn. Oh, this is where the streetcar used to run. And
Do you think that you know more about the history of Pittsburgh than anyone at this point?
No.
No.
But I said the thing that I think I love most about Pittsburgh, because I think as the 19th century became the 20th century, we were a world capital.
Right.
We still profit from that. And that's why we have a great foundation community here. There's money, old money here. It's just, there's so much to discover. I've been at it for 38 years here at WQED, and I still am delighted and surprised, at things that go on here. So
I love the history of this city. There's so much that I think a lot of Pittsburghers, especially our generation, take for granted, overlook. But there's, one of my favorite things is,
Down below.
some of these old pictures, to get an old picture of the city, and not just, downtown, but you'll get an old picture and like, oh, okay, that's where this is now. That's where this is now. Recently, we took my kids to when the auto show was downtown this year. We go every year. It's just, I'm a car guy. I love to do it, right? So we go every year, my wife and the kids. But before we went up to Mount Washington, had dinner. And my wife and I thought, the kids have never been on the incline. Let's take the kids on the incline. So at first they're like, is this like a ride? How fast does this go? And I'm like, listen, this is transportation. This is not fast. This is how people used to get to work. Okay. This is not a ride. But the old pictures that they have in the station, they showed where right next to it was another incline for the horses, right? And you could walk over and you can kind of see where it was. The concrete platform's still there. And I love that. I love looking at the old pictures and then looking at what's there now.
I'm thinking that must have been the Mon incline.
It's the one.
Goes down to Station Square.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right to the, if you're looking at the city, it's to the right.
Yeah.
Is where that platform is.
I'm a fan of the other one.
The
Duquesne incline.
What makes you like that one better?
Thank you for listening. And now a brief word from our sponsor. Streamline your life with Duro Cleaner's complete pickup and delivery service. From your doorstep to their state-of-the-art cleaning facility and back, all without you lifting a finger. Get time back in your day and fresh, ready-to-go clothes. And just wait, big things are coming soon to make your experience even better. Visit DuroCleaners.com because life's better without laundry. And now, back to the show.
I'm a fan of the other one. The Duquesne incline.
What makes you like that one better?
They have a legitimate claim on being the oldest public transportation vehicles in constant use in the world.
Really?
Those are the original cars. Now, the Mon incline, those cars have been replaced 1,000 times. And they're like layered. You get, 3 layers, whereas the Duquesne incline is just one little cab. And it smells like Kennywood.
Really?
It is more like a ride. When you said that, I thought, was this the Duquesne or the Mon incline?
I'm going to have to go. We're going to have to take a ride.
Yeah, and they have a concrete deck. They did not have a double incline there.
Right.
But I think in one of my shows, we actually have footage of the other incline. And the biggest incline went from the Strip up to the Hill District. And you can still see some of those stanchions beside Bigelow Boulevard, and there's still one down in the Strip too. That was able to put a whole coal car from a train,
really,
and take it up to the hill. But no, I've always loved the Duquesne incline, and it's also I do a thing with WDVE. I've done it the last 2 years. For Valentine's Day, they do a special thing on the Duquesne incline.
I think, I've seen that.
Yeah, like the Ride of Love or something like that. And they asked me to tell a little bit of the history. And my favorite thing is that when Bill Clinton was president, John Major was the Prime Minister of England. Mm-hmm. And at the G7 or the G9 or G20 or something.
It was G20 in Pittsburgh,
Well, it wasn't that then. It was before that. Because that's during Obama that the G20 comes. It was in Tokyo, I think, that Clinton found out that John Major's father and grandfather both lived in Pittsburgh.
Huh, really?
Yes. And so he said, we're going to have a mini summit in Pittsburgh. And he met him. I mean, Clinton flew in, John Major flew in. I don't know that Major had been here before or not. I'm not sure. But his grandfather came to work and built ovens for Carnegie, in the early days of iron and steel and all of that. And then he went home and he and his wife went back to England, had their child there. When they came back to Pittsburgh with their son, who was then a teenager, he got involved in the local circus. And he and another woman performed in this circus as Drummond Major. And he adopted the name Major.
Huh.
And then they used both names for a while. And then John Major, the Prime Minister of England, his name Major was because his dad was a circus performer in Pittsburgh, which I love.
Really?
Yes. And so I had been telling that story for a long time. And then I was reading something else about it. And at the bottom of the Wikipedia page now, not for John Major, but for his father, the circus performer, who became a vaudeville performer in England when he went back, there's just a note at the bottom that says, David Bowie's biographer feels certain that David Bowie's song, Space Oddity, that says ground control to Major Tom, was because he saw a poster for Tom Major.
No way.
The father. So I said, that's just the weirdest Pittsburgh connections, but I related all to the Duquesne Incline.
Yeah.
Because I would never have paid any attention to that if I didn't know that Bill Clinton and John Major rode up the Duquesne Incline to have dinner on Mount Washington. So that's the kind of stuff that makes
Pittsburgh's intertwined in everything.
Yes. Well, then that's the best thing. It's just a surprise.
Yeah, you can't really go anywhere in life and spend more than a day and not be like, I was sitting in a hot tub on like my senior break trip or something, and the guy sitting to the right, I just heard him talk one time, and I was like, he's from Pittsburgh, and here he saved our principal's life. He had swallowed a grape, and he gave him the Heimlich maneuver in the cafeteria at high school, and I was like, well, there goes my fake ID, because I just told you what year I graduated high school. I'm not 21. So, but yeah, Pittsburgh's everywhere. Everywhere
Pittsburgh
you go.
is everywhere. So. Yeah. Yeah, and I just love Pittsburgh has a very rich history, with the Carnegie and Frick and, all the industry that was here for so many years. And it's I don't know, I really find it intriguing and fascinating. So I love that part of the city.
So I guess to get back more to like, because this is always just fun to just talk about Pittsburgh. I mean, we know that it's the best city in the world, right?
Right.
So like, where do you see, like, what's your next project? Like, what are you looking to do now? Like, obviously you're still working every day.
Yeah. I mean, we're plugging out these stories. Actually, I just mentioned to Frank today, this is a sort of a whim, but the first person that I talked about it with, Manette Seat, who's the head of the production department there now, she was very positive. USA Today, the newspaper, still does top 10 lists. And this is just recently they did top 10 places to celebrate Easter. And we were number 2.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. And so I looked at the article, and one of the big reasons why is we are number 1 in the number of chocolate and candy stores per capita.
Really?
And I just thought, oh, that's a cool story.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's, Sarah's Candies in Canonsburg, there's Dorothy's in White Oak, there's Betsy Ann Chocolates up in Westview. I did a story there already, but I wouldn't mind doing another one to find out what's changed since I was there last.
Yeah.
And, there are candy stores and shops. And the chocolate angle interests me a little bit more than candy shops. But
it's funny, too, because you say like every town has a bakery. In Western PA, it seems like every town has a chocolate, I mean, it's kind of neat. So
totally.
Plus, you get to eat chocolate, right? It's part of the gig, right?
Well, with Frank, my cameraman, and his daughter, Sophia, we did a little scouting trip. I just wanted to drive Route 8. I did a show called Route 88, the short history of Route 88, and I thought, Route 8 could be also good. I mean, I didn't know much about it. It starts at Channel 4. I didn't know that.
No.
That's where Route 8 starts. I mean, at the southern end,
right.
And it ends in Erie.
Yeah.
So we did it in the day. And I said, we're going to find a place there at the end. And, we see the sign that says End 8. And there's like 1 block to a chocolate store. And we went in there, and it was just excellent. And there's a kind of chocolate that they make that's just eerie, and it was just really great. So we never got to do it, but
it's crazy that these businesses have like thrived around these highway numbers, because we go to Key West every year, and mile marker 0 is like their thing down there. Like, it's just, if without it, it's kind of lost part of its identity,
Right.
And with GPS, like you guys talked about, not getting lost, nobody cares about a mile marker. They just keep driving,
So I have a good question for you, I think.
You think?
You have been you have seen and experienced so much of what this city has to offer, between Kennywood and the food and all the landmarks and everything this city has to offer. And I've had this situation happen where I've had people come from out of town. What should I see? If you had to curate a day of all the best stuff for somebody to get the full picture of what is Pittsburgh, because everybody's going to say Permanis, and what in your mind for somebody coming out of town is the best way to experience Pittsburgh in a day?
Well, I think, some downtown, some strip. I think, the strip is just enchanting, especially Penn Avenue, but there are other places. And oddly enough, 2 of them are from my show, Holy Pittsburgh, which is really early on. But to see the Moxovanka murals in Millvale in the St. Nicholas Church, they are incredible. And just, something that you don't expect to see, and it tells you various things. I said, to me, it just lets me know that, when immigrants from Eastern Europe were coming here, I think the Catholic diocese wasn't paying much attention, because those murals are wild and wonderful, and, tell you so much about the tensions they were dealing with. If you stand at the altar and look back, there's the Croatian mother sends her sons off to war, and over here it's the American mother sends her sons to industry, and that kind of thing. And I think the most powerful one is justice, holding the scales, and there in St. Nicholas, she has on a gas mask, because the murals were done in the 30s, sort of between World War I and World War II. They were just astounding.
What was the name of that church?
St. Nicholas Croatian Catholic Church. And I always was surprised. I always loved the band Talking Heads. And David Byrne wrote a book about traveling America with his bicycle. He would fly with the bicycle to every town where he was going to perform. And there is a chapter on Pittsburgh. And his goal while he was in town was to see the Moxovanka murals in St. Nicholas. And it was his birthday. And he went up there and he saw the murals, and he loves the murals. And somebody said, well, while you're here, there's a great French bakery here in Millvale, Jean-Marc Chatelier's bakery. You should check it out. And he said, okay. And he rode his bike from St. Nicholas up on the hill down into downtown Millvale and found the French bakery, Jean-Marc. And when he went in, always, to this day, if they're only open on the weekends now, I think, but there's always a stack of Breton cakes, which is this very simple cake that doesn't look like it's going to be, but they are incredible. They taste like pure butter. They're just excellent. And he said that's the thing that his grandmother made for him on every birthday.
Oh, no way.
A Breton cake. And so he writes as much about Jean-Marc's bakery as he does about the Moxovanka murals. So I know, but I always think, both those places are good places to take people just to feel the Lincoln Pharmacy in Millvale. I don't know if you've ever been there, but
that's where Pamela's is next.
That is Pamela's in Millvale. It's inside the Lincoln Pharmacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
There it's called the P&G Diner.
Correct. Yeah.
I
think Barack Obama.
No, Barack
Michelle was there.
Michelle was there, and they have a chair that says Michelle Obama sat here. That was during the G20.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had loved Pamela's in the Strip.
Okay.
When he was campaigning for president, he found Pamela's, and then he took them to Washington. They made breakfast, Pamela. And
Wouldn't it be nice to
Gail.
be president? Like, I'm really hungry for an hot dog and a Pamela's pancake.
A Pamela's
Come
pancake
down
was
to
the best
DC,
one.
bring them in.
But then I also like to take people up to Troy Hill to St. Anthony's Chapel, because that's an incredible place. I mean, I said both of those are in Holy Pittsburgh. St. Nicholas and St. Anthony's Chapel, which is the world's largest collection of relics outside the Vatican.
One of my favorite days in Pittsburgh, I was first dating my wife. We were in the Strip doing the Strip thing, like kind of just wasting time and hanging out. And we ran into St. Patrick's Church in their courtyard. And I was like, you could close your eyes and you're not in Pittsburgh anymore.
Right.
It's beautiful.
And they have those stairs that you have to go up on your knees.
Yeah, and it's like Pittsburgh just has that all around it. You just got to know where to look.
Exactly. Yeah. If a little bit of, investigation, you can find all kinds of really incredible things here. So that's the beauty of Pittsburgh and its surprises, So
there's no real number one spot you'd have to take someone. Like, if you bring someone in from out of town, where do you have to take them?
No, those are my two the unexpecteds, I think. And I think there was a woman that had been a photographer at my station in South Carolina. She came through with her husband and kids and, take us around, show us what we should see. And I think we went to the Strip and stopped somewhere downtown. And then she said, what are those things that go up and down the hill? And I said, oh, the inclines, we got to go. And so we rode the Duquesne Incline.
You can't really if you're just trying to have fun in Pittsburgh, you can't really have a bad day.
No. And actually, I often point out, again, those USA Today top 10 things. I remember shortly after I got here, I think they did top 10 best views in America or natural views in America. And number 1 was the Grand Canyon. Number 2 was Pittsburgh from Mount Washington at night.
It's stunning.
It's just stunning. But I also think the West End Overlook may be better. And
there's some views from Upper North Side when you look into
from like Fine View.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then talk about getting lost and looking for your way. You make a left and you're going down a hill that's still brick with the rail cars tracks to them, and you look up and you're like looking at Heinz Field and right into the city. You're like, this is awesome. Like it's so. Yeah,
but then that also makes me think. I say we brag about being the city of bridges, but we are the city of retaining walls too. And got to show people some retaining walls because we have some beauties.
Yeah, we do.
So no signs of stopping anytime soon. Still putting projects together.
As long as they'll let me, plug away, I will plug away. No, I mean, I love what I do.
Yeah.
And, no need to stop at this point, but,
Do you have any advice for somebody like a younger guy that wants to be the next Rick Sebak?
Read a lot, write a lot. I mean, that's always been my thing to kids, You think it doesn't matter, but it does. And actually, I remember when I applied for the job here in Pittsburgh, when I got the job and was given an office, all the tapes were in there that they had gotten from applicants. And there were like 240 or something. And I said to the woman who hired me, how do you go through all that? And she said, well, it's not easy. She said, but I'll tell you, she said, everyone has a cover letter. If there's a grammatical error in the cover letter, that's the first thing that goes. And I said, you got to know how to, write and, know your grammar and all of that. And you think it doesn't matter, but it does.
It certainly does.
And I guess maybe AI can help you now, but,
I think I told this story. I told you this before, but I had a post on Facebook that I typed up and I wrote it, and Facebook flagged it as possibly AI.
Wow.
So I think my grammar was so spot on that they didn't think I wrote it. I'm like, wait a second, Facebook. I wrote that shit. Leave me alone. This was not AI.
That's the thing with our music, our intro music. He composed it, right?
Right.
And they always want to flag it for copyright. And it's like, wait a second.
Wait, we wrote that. Yeah.
Not we.
Not we.
He.
Yeah. What was your hardest project that you've had to do?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Throwing zingers at you now.
It's funny because I just mentioned, I always thought if I get another chance to do Holy Pittsburgh over, I would want to do that. Just because at the time I was, I didn't know how wacky I could be. It was one of the first shows I did. I mean, I'd already done Kennywood Memories, but I think next one is Holy Pittsburgh.
Then you're keeping it.
And it was an assignment, do a
you're
show
keeping
about
it
this.
tight to your vest. It's the church. It's the,
there is a segment in it that I love about the women who make pierogies at St. John the Baptist on the south side. I found at that time, because we were a television station, you had ASCAP and BMI licenses. You could use any music you wanted, as long as it was on the music cue sheets. And I found a guy that used to be on Garrison Keillor's show on National Public Radio, and I'm not going to remember his name, the musician, but he was the musician for that show. And he did a version of Hank Williams' Hey Good Lookin' in Ukrainian. And I had Ukrainian women making pierogi. They don't say pierogi in Ukraine, they say pierogi. And I just thought, this is so perfect. Hey Good Looking in Ukrainian to show with the women at St. John the Baptist Ukrainian Catholic Church. But I would love to do that over again. But I mean, I don't know that I have any, hardest things. I think because I'm so involved in picking the topic, I don't want to say, that was a mistake. Because I don't know that I ever thought, this one was really stupid or anything like that. But, I work in a weird niche in television, I think. I'm basically out to celebrate places. I'm not 60 Minutes, attacking anybody or...
It's not an expose.
Yeah, it's not hard journalism. It's a celebration, both my local and my national shows. In fact, I say the national shows are really just us doing what we do here in Pittsburgh and other cities and stuff like that. We want to find those little places that matter. My first national programs, ice cream and shore things. I did a show about ice cream. That was after Diners. When the Diners show was nationally broadcast and PBS said, this really worked. We got great ratings and because people were clicking through. They said, what else do you want to do like on a national scale? And I made a list of 10 things. And from that, I think we ended up maybe doing all 10. But the first ones were ice cream and beaches. We didn't have the internet. It was like, how do you find the next story? And I heard about there was this convention of ice cream aficionados in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we went to that, and that gave us a lot of contacts.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of story from that. But it also, allowed us to start, okay, we're going to go here. We went to Penn State, because that's the most famous ice cream school in America. And who's their most famous alumni? Ben and Jerry.
Yeah.
So we got in touch with Ben and Jerry's. We went up to Vermont. We went to Ben and Jerry's. I said to them, okay, obviously this is your scene. If you don't get ice cream here, where else would you want to go for ice cream? And they said, Robin Rose in California. We went to Robin Rose's out there, and it was just the same thing. We passed from one to another, and
I thought you were going to say they said Clavons. I was like,
no,
it would have blown your mind.
Although Clavons is pretty great.
Yeah.
It got better. Mr. Clavon at the beginning, it was a drugstore.
Yeah.
And actually that was, we were doing the strip show, and the Post-Gazette did a story. They said, we just like to come along for a day, and that guy stayed with us for a day, and we were shooting in the strip, and it was the day that Jimmy Krenn was with us, and we were talking to him about growing up in the strip and, him walking through Woolies and stuff like that. And it made the front page of the paper, like on Memorial Day weekend or something like that. And then the next day, Mr. Clavon said, you're doing a show about the strip. You need to know about my parents' drugstore. And I said, yeah. And he goes, it's closed. It was totally closed. And we went down, and it was magic to see what was there still. And the first day that when we first went down to see, are we going to do this? There were building materials in there. And I said, okay, but you could see the old marble counters and the seats and everything. And I said, okay, we'll come back. I said, we thought we were done shooting, but this is really a beautiful story. And so we decided to make another day of production, and he got that stuff all out. So it was even better. And, we went in, and then he reopened it as an ice cream place, which was really brilliant.
They have a lot of obscure candy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was a great place. And then he sold it. He passed away. And it was complicated because I think it was owned by his 8 brothers and sisters or something like that. It was complicated.
Yeah.
But it was really fun and really beautiful, and it still is a great place. So I would still wander in there if I were in Strip.
So we talked about the hardest project, which was just my lead up to what was your favorite project you ever did?
Impossible to say because they're my children, but if you twist my arm, I would probably say a hot dog program, which is odd because I think in general, the Pittsburgh shows I love because they're Pittsburgh, and nobody can love a national show the way Pittsburghers love the Pittsburgh shows. But hot dogs was that one where I was first allowed to pick my crew.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it made it just really wonderful. And we did hot dogs and amusement parks at the same time. So we had done ice cream and beaches. Now we were doing hot dogs and amusement parks. And the crew, much as I love them, they all said, no one's going to watch this hot dog program. But they were really excited about the amusement parks. Because we got to go to, we wanted to do only amusement parks that were older than Disneyland, because Disneyland changed that business. And that became the era of, theme parks. We wanted all parks that were older than Disneyland. And so it was really fun. And, I always laugh because my cameraman for part of it was Buck Brinson, who I had worked with in South Carolina. And, sometimes they would say like, oh, you want to take the camera on the roller coaster, to strap you down and all of this. And then we were at one park down in the South, and Buck said, I think I could say, I just want to stand in the middle of the track. And then when I see the thing coming, I'll just jump out of the way. Because there's so few, controls over what they were going to allow you to do. So, I love the hot dog program. And
where about the country were you for that?
Well, we went to Pink's in LA. I'm trying to think where we, the farthest away. We did a couple down south. I went back to Columbia, South Carolina, where I had worked for South Carolina Educational Television. We did Frank's, which was still there at the time. It's not there anymore, but that was, I sort of lived at Frank's. I went there every morning and worked the New York Times crossword puzzle. And they serve breakfast and hot dogs.
We thought maybe you just liked having hot dogs for breakfast.
We also went to Macon, Georgia, and,
So do you have a favorite hot dog?
At this point, I probably D's in my neighborhood. I live in Regent Square, and D's hot dogs, they're really
D's
good.
is a good.
Those are really good.
Yeah. The thing that I want, no matter where I am, I also like Jim's hot dogs in West Mifflin. They are just very careful, but they serve skinless wieners. I want a natural casing wiener if I'm going to have a hot dog. I want it to have that snap.
The snap, yeah.
But at the same time, while we were doing the hot dog program, Mayor Murphy at the time asked me to come speak at a breakfast. And I went and I talked about, some of my shows and what we were doing then, working on this hot dog thing. And this older guy came up to me afterwards. He goes, did you know the skinless wiener was invented here in Pittsburgh? I said, no. I said, get out. He goes, yeah. He said, I think at Mellon Institute. So I got back to work, and I'm working with Nancy Coates Greenwood. And I said, Nancy, this guy just said, I said, could you go down and check? Walk down. It's only like 2 blocks from QED to Mellon Institute. Contact and there must be somebody there that's their historian or librarian or something. And she did all that, and they said, no, they could find something from the 1950s. And I said, that's way too late. The skinless wieners had been around more than that. And I said, okay, well then, by the time we got to hot dogs, we were able to use search engines. Google didn't exist yet, but we were using search engines, and Nancy and I would compete to see what we could find. I said, go online and see if you can find out who claims to have invented the skinless wiener. And it turned out to be a packing house in Chicago. And so I said, well, call them and find out, And so she did. And, they said, oh, we have a brochure about it. And, now it would be online. But and she said, well, would you send us one of those brochures? Oh, we'd love to. And we get the brochure. And the first line is, working with scientists at the Mellon Institute in Pittsburgh. And it was around 1911. And so that made it much, more reasonable. And then with that information, we were able to go back to Mellon Institute and we found out that the scientists there who were working on, hot dogs were relatively new, and they thought they were going to run out of casings. So they wanted to see if they could fabricate an edible casing out of something else. And they thought the answer was cotton, a very thin cotton which you could eat. And so some of the scientists who were watching the other scientists try to come up with something to make a casing on a hot dog with, they made fun of them for trying to put undershirts on hot dogs, on sausages. But what happened was they did this cotton experiment, and when they then smoked the hot dog to cook it, it fell off.
Caught on fire.
No, it just fell off, and then the hot dog was in the right shape. So they serendipitously discovered that, as long as you have a casing on it while it cooks, then you can take the casing off. And so now it's done mostly with plastics. But, if the hot dogs are straight and they fit in one of those 10 packs, those are skinless wieners, invented in Pittsburgh. But I would always prefer the natural casing wieners, which are a little bit irregular, and they're always more messy in the bag. But,
and then hot dog shops started popping up, recently. There's one right down in Springdale, Pittsburgh Street Dogs.
I've been there once, and it was excellent. And they offered you the choice, skinless or natural casing, which I thought was brilliant. I think every place should do that, because they say kids aren't crazy about the snap.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to bite through the natural casing, but
if they don't know any better, they don't know.
If you didn't tell them.
That's how I was raised, and that's you need a pair of scissors to cut hot dogs. That's just the way it is. You know what I mean? You got to cut them apart.
Yeah.
So, I think we had some rapid fire questions. You want to do those?
Yeah.
You want to back? I'll just pull it up right.
Quick.
Is this going to be difficult?
No.
Okay.
Just funny.
What's your social security number?
You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pop or soda?
Oh, pop. Totally.
Heinz Field or AccuSure?
Oh, Heinz Field, I think, yeah.
Are Kennywood potato patch fries overrated or legendary?
They're really good at Kennywood. If you had asked me Kennywood, potato patch, or O, I would say O fries.
I missed the O.
Yeah, O fries were double cooked.
Yeah,
they cooked them first in a lower temperature oil, and then when you ordered them, they would put a case on them or put an edge on them, and that was really good. I think O fries were better than potato patch, but at Kennywood, potato patch tastes great.
Have you had food from they have the O truck now, the food truck?
No.
I guess Dan Marino and Larry Richard brought back, and Jim Kren brought back a food truck that is the O. I'm wondering if their fries are anywhere near that.
I have no idea. Haven't been there.
But now we just got off total topic. What's that?
We'll have to track it down.
So yeah, Jim Kren's involved in that with Danny Marino. But downtown or the Strip?
Strip.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like the last one.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Kenny Chesney concerts on the North Shore. What's your thoughts?
Yes or no?
I'm not a big concert guy.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that the Club Cafe is still alive, that it's going to come back.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. That's great.
And that's the kind of venue that I like really now.
We had Brian Drusky on from Drusky Entertainment last episode, and there's a huge music scene in Pittsburgh that kind of but there's a lot of great little venues, and I prefer the smaller crowds.
I love the smaller little venues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that, and I've never seen Kenny Chesney, so
I think
but
just about the atmosphere. It kind of paints Pittsburgh in a bad light.
Yeah, well, I play records on Wednesday nights. I play vinyl records at the Independent Brewing Company in Squirrel Hill. And I started during the pandemic. Through a series of circumstances, I found out that Pete Kurzweg, one of the guys that owns those bars, Hidden Harbor and Independent Brewing, they're next door to each other and they share the kitchen. They're owned by the same guys.
Okay.
But I found out that he was playing records. And I said, what do you mean you're playing records? He goes, we play the records on Wednesday nights. And I said, I want to do that. And he goes, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing it now for 5 years.
Yeah, because we originally asked you Wednesday. We're like, can't do Wednesday.
Can't do Wednesday. And then over the years, I would have various people come in. And the person who loved doing it the most was Lance Jones. And Lance used to be the manager of Star Lake. So he's met most of the artists that were playing, you know, and he has great stories and all of that kind of stuff. So, but I think I only went to Star Lake maybe once or twice.
It's a long drive.
Star Lake's tough because it's a long drive and the traffic leaving that place. Oof,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Well, actually, Lance, after he left Star Lake, worked at QED. That's how I know him. He got QED involved with Willie Nelson and the what do you call it? The big annual conference. Farm Aid. Yes, Farm Aid. And so because QED became the media sponsor for Farm Aid one year, I got to be one of the announcers, and I was supposed to introduce Willie Nelson's son's band, and I was waiting backstage to go out and do that, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, but Willie wants to introduce them." And I said, "I understand totally." But then he came and talked to me the whole time, backstage, and it was really nice. And I did get to introduce Sheryl Crow, but it was a great event, and just that kind of thing. That's a big audience.
Yeah.
But Club Cafe is more my style.
You have one hell of a filmography here.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, but I've been there a while.
I know. Is there a place that someone can watch all these?
It's interesting there at the end. That's off of Wikipedia. And I added some things where I knew Wikipedia had left things out. For some reason, they never acknowledged my series called It's Pittsburgh and a lot of other stuff. Everything else seems to be okay.
Don't feel bad. Wikipedia just deletes me all the time. I've been trying to add myself for years, and they just keep kicking me out.
I do not know who does it. I'm serious.
Sam at Wikipedia.
I don't know who keeps it up to date. Who does. There's a new guy or a guy at work that I've been working with, and I said, I hated the picture that was there, and he was able to figure out how to change it. So, and it says some of the national programs are hard to find. And that's why, they're not on the PBS app right now, but I'm trying to get them there. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. Then most of the local stuff is on YouTube or on QED's Passport. Passport means, that's the PBS streaming service. Just the national shows that I've done are not there, and I think they should be.
Get on it, Nate. Get them on there.
Well, I'm going to go through this list because there's a lot of things on here that I wasn't aware of, and I'm going to watch them.
Yeah.
I'm going to find them.
Yeah.
And actually, even just looking at it today, I had to add I don't know if you've ever seen the Dirty Dozen show. We won an Emmy for that, which is used to be the day after Thanksgiving, the 13 steepest hills in Pittsburgh on bikes. And then just incredible.
Yeah, I don't understand how those guys do that.
Oh, I do. I said I might at the time have been able to do one hill, but that would have been it.
Yeah, maybe an electric bike.
And walked the last part of it.
Yeah.
But they do 13 and,
I always like things that, what was the one that
things that aren't there anymore?
Yeah, and I was like, that's how Pittsburghers give directions.
Yeah.
Like, if you would ask me how to get here, you'd be like, go into Harmonville, find Ames, make a right on 910. It's just how Pittsburghers give directions.
Yeah. No.
So.
And that's okay, because we have a stable population.
Yeah.
That's right. So, well, this was great.
I thank you.
Awesome. I'm
it's
so
fun
glad to sit down with you.
Yeah.
This was so fun.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. Find and follow us on your preferred podcast streaming platform. Like and subscribe, and leave us a rating and review. You can join us socially on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. You can email the show at info@betweentwobridgespodcast.com. Until next time, make it till you rake it.
See, you did great. And you were worried.
I don't know if I did great, but it was fun talking to you guys.